I remember the exact moment I sat up in bed on the 31st morning and thought, something is different. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a switch had been flipped. It was quieter than that, a kind of mental clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe longer. My body felt settled, almost electric in its stillness. And there was something else, something I couldn't immediately name, something happening below the surface of my awareness that felt like a system coming back online after a long time running in low-power mode. I didn't understand what had happened yet. I just sat there, in the early light, trying to figure out if I was imagining it. To explain what that morning meant, I have to go back 30 days. And I have to be honest with you, not in a performative way, not in that oversharing way people sometimes use to seem relatable, but genuinely honest, because what I found during those 30 days is the kind of thing that changes how you see your own body. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Started, like a lot of things in my life, with a question I couldn't answer. I had been noticing gradually, then all at once, that something about my energy wasn't right. Not tired exactly. Not sick. Just dulled. The focus I used to have in the mornings had softened into something foggy. My drive, the kind that used to get me out of bed with purpose, had gone quiet. And my sexual performance, and I'm saying this plainly because I think a lot of men need to hear this said plainly, had become inconsistent in ways I couldn't explain. There were moments where my body simply didn't respond the way I expected it to. Where things ended faster than I wanted them to. Where the confidence I used to carry into intimacy had been replaced by a low-level anxiety I was barely aware of. I didn't connect any of that to what I was doing every day. That was the thing. I had no idea those two realities were woven together. So I decided to run an experiment. 30 days. I would ejaculate every single day, and I would pay attention, really pay attention, to what was happening inside my body. My mood, my focus, my energy levels, my libido, my performance. No agenda, no expected outcome. Just observation, the way a scientist observes something they don't yet understand. I started tracking everything in a notebook. Not obsessively, but consistently. And for the first few days, I noticed almost nothing unusual. Day 1, day 2, day 3, normal. Expected. The kind of baseline data that doesn't mean anything yet. But by the end of the first week, something had shifted. A subtle restlessness. A slight flatness in my motivation that I initially blamed on work, on sleep, on the weather. The kind of excuse-making that's very easy to do when you don't yet have the framework to understand what's actually happening. Here's what I didn't know at the time, and what took me weeks of research to understand properly. Every time a man ejaculates, his brain is flooded with a specific sequence of neurochemicals. Dopamine, the molecule associated with drive, reward, and motivation, spikes dramatically in the lead-up to orgasm. Then, immediately after ejaculation, prolactin rises sharply. Prolactin is the hormone responsible for the refractory period, that window of low libido and reduced energy that follows orgasm. It's part of the body's natural regulation system. It's supposed to be temporary. But here's what nobody tells you. When you repeat that cycle daily, without variation, without rest, something begins to change in the architecture of the system itself. The dopamine receptors, the cellular ports that receive dopamine signal, begin to downregulate. They become less sensitive. The brain, in its relentless drive to maintain equilibrium, starts to quiet the very receptors that make motivation, focus, and drive feel good. It's not punishment. It's adaptation. The brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do. But the effect, from the inside, feels like something has been slowly dimmed. This is the same mechanism that underlies addiction. Not in a moral sense, I'm not making a moral argument here, but in a purely neurological sense. When any stimulus is repeated intensely and frequently, the system adapts by reducing sensitivity to that stimulus. And when sensitivity drops, you need more of the same stimulation to feel the same effect. The threshold rises, and below that threshold, everything starts to feel a little grayer. By the second week of my experiment, I was living inside that gray. I was getting things done. I was functional. But the color had come out of things slightly. And in the bedroom, and again, I'm saying this because I think it's important, things were becoming less reliable. The control I wanted wasn't always there. The intensity one expected wasn't arriving the way it should. If you're listening to this right now and something I'm saying is landing a little too close, if you recognize that fog, that inconsistency, that feeling that your body isn't responding the way it used to, I left something in the first link in the description that I genuinely think is worth your time. It's not a promise. It's not a sales pitch. It's a clear, honest explanation of what actually works for men who are dealing with exactly what I'm describing: low control, inconsistent performance, ejaculation that happens before you want it to. 2 minutes. First link. That's all I'm asking. Back to the experiment. By the 3rd week, I had started reading seriously. Not forums, not opinion pieces. I went looking for peer-reviewed research. And I found it. There's a study published in the Journal of Zhejiang University in 2003 that followed men through varying periods of abstinence and sexual activity and measured their testosterone levels at different points. What they found was striking. After 7 days of abstinence, testosterone levels peaked at approximately 145% above baseline. 145%. The body, when given a window of rest, doesn't just recover, it overcompensates. It surges. Now, that study is about abstinence, not about daily ejaculation. But it was the piece I needed to understand what was happening in the other direction. If rest creates a testosterone surge, then sustained daily activation without rest creates the opposite pressure. A gradual suppression, a biological signal to the body that it is spending resources faster than it's recovering them. The mechanism behind this is the HPG axis, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which is the hormonal command center that regulates testosterone production and sexual response in men. It's a feedback loop. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary signals the testes produce testosterone, and testosterone feeds back to the hypothalamus to regulate how much signal gets sent. When this loop is operating under constant high demand, it responds the way any system under chronic load responds. It adjusts its output downward to protect itself. This isn't weakness. This is engineering. Your body is extraordinarily well designed. But it's designed for variety, for cycles of activity and rest, for oscillation rather than monotony. And when you flatten that oscillation, when every day is the same, when the stimulus is identical, when there's no change in the pattern, the system starts to interpret that flatness as its new normal. By the end of the 3rd week, I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fully fix. My workouts felt harder for less result. My mental focus, which had always been one of my strongest assets, had become unreliable. And the anxiety I had noticed at the beginning of the
Experimente that low level uncertainty around performance, had settled into something more persistent, but he had committed to 30 days. So I kept going. The 4th week was where the data started to get interesting. Because around day 23, 24, I noticed something I had expected, a kind of plateau. The deterioration seemed to stop. The fog didn't lift but it didn't deepen. My body seemed to have found a new equilibrium, lower than where it started but stable. And there was something almost eerie about that stability. Like the system had accepted its new parameters and stopped fighting them. I finished day 30 on a Tuesday evening. Went to sleep without ceremony. No ritual no expectation. Cash de que é close off an experiment. And then evoke up on Wednesday morning. I've already told you what that morning felt like, the clarity, the energy, the thing I could ignore the name. But now we can name it. What I experienced on the morning of day 31 was my body beginning the process of resensitization. The downregulated dopamine receptors, freed from the constant daily demand, were beginning to recover their sensitivity. The HPG axis, no longer under sustained daily pressure, was recalibrating upward. And the neurological system that governs sexual response, specifically the interplay between dopamine, testosterone, and the sympathetic nervous system, was registering a kind of reset. The science for this is well documented in the literature on neuroplasticity of the reward system. The brain's capacity to restore receptor sensitivity after a period of downregulation is one of the most well-replicated findings in neuroscience. It doesn't require months. For most men, meaningful resensitization can begin within days of changing a pattern. The brain is not rigid, it is remarkably adaptive, in both directions. What felt on that 31st morning was the beginning of that upward adaptation. And it was more distinct, more noticeable, more surprising precisely because the contrast was so clear. First days of one state, followed by the sudden shift of emerging from it, the body's own way of showing you, with no ambiguity, what had changed. There were things you understood after those first days that you had understood before, and you want to be precise about what they are. First, frequency alone is not the enemy. Men who have active, out-sex lives with genuine variety, emotional connection, novelty and appropriate recovery, don't necessarily experience the same dysregulation. The problem is the activity. The problem is the monotony. The problem is the pattern becoming a flatline. Second, the relationship between ejaculation frequency and performance is not linear. More does not create more, and less, in the context of intentional rest, create significantly more. Third, the symptoms that many may attribute to aging, stress, or generic fatigue, the inconsistency in performance, the reduced control, the low drive, the difficulty with focus, are in many cases expressions of a neurological and hormonal system that has adapted to a depleting pattern and is quietly asking for something different. I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing anything. What I'm describing is a documented biological process, and what you do with that information belongs entirely to you. But I do think that most men, if they are given this information clearly and without condescension, would make different choices. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. And understanding is the only thing I set out to find when I started this experiment 30 days before that morning. If you're still here with me, and I think you are, because this is the kind of information that doesn't let you go once it starts to make sense. You want to say one more thing before I close. Everything I discovered during those first days, all the reading, all the research, all the observation, eventually led me to understand why so many men feel stuck. Stuck in low energy, stuck in performance they can't control, stuck in a pattern they didn't consciously choose and don't know how to change. The first link in the description is where I put what actually works. Not theory, not visual thinking but a clear, honest guide to understanding how your body functions and what is genuinely possible when you stop working against your own biology and start working with it. It's the first link. It's worth your time. The morning of the first one told me that the body is always in conversation with you. It is always telling you something. The question is whether you know the language. After this experiment, you understand just a little more of it and I think you deserve to as well. If this kind of content matters to you, if you want more of this, more honest investigation, more science told through real experience, subscribe to this channel. Every video here is built on the same foundation. The truth about what happens inside the male body, told without embarrassment and without shortcuts. There's more coming. And I think you will want to be here for it.